Good evening. We are here once again for the second episode with Mr. Kenneth Cuvalay. We all know what went down approximately 2019 when we did our first recording. Very interesting topics. And here we are once again for our second episode.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Cuvalay, my distinguished niece, and Uli, his brother, all my humble and distinguished nephews. I'm glad to be here today again. And as Carol just mentioned, we are back on at this moment after somewhere approximately 2019 or 18, somewhere in between. But in any case, there are a lot happened since then. We had the transition in October 2010. Then we had a coup d'etat, a takeover of our democratically elected government on the 18th of February 2018. Recently, there has been some talk about the reinstallation or the restoring of democracy on the island, which for me is a very contradictable terminology or explanation, rather. Because once a central colonial government can step in and take your own government away when it feels that that moment is the right moment, or whichever other moment is their right moment, and then say to our people, well, we are restoring your democracy. You're free to speak again. Let me put it that way. It have a great correlation with the enslavement and the trafficking in our African ancestors as well. Because as we go around, we rejoice and so-called commemorate on the 1st of July every year, and that alleged moment supposed to be the moment where our ancestors was freed. And I'm always saying, if somebody had had to so-called give you freedom, in the first place you were never free. Freedom is something which I determine and define for myself, not what somebody else would determine for me or define. So there's a lot of contradiction to everything. Then after 2018, naturally, COVID came around, which was disastrous globally for most African people on this planet when you look at everything. Not to talk about the intrusive fear in communities, if you don't take this vaccine, you lose your job, you may not be able to travel. But at the same time, it was the biggest moment in mankind lifetime that the pharmaceutical industries made more money more than ever. So, there is a lot of contradictions to the things and the way things are transpiring and the way we as community are situated at the same time. One of the things which I notice is happening in Stacia after 2010, the transition, is that people tend to be even more dependent than ever. I can remember on this island when I was growing up, we had all kind of food production: yams, potatoes, carrot, you name it. You have multiple forms of fruits. Right now, you have the tamarind, the mango season come around. The mangoes will be on the ground rotting, and yet our people go to the supermarket and buy, the contaminated genetical modified, mangoes which were made to grow faster than anything else. Additionally to that, overproduction of fabricated chicken and meat and so forth, while this island is full of chicken walking around and our people consider those chickens to be nasty, it's very ironic that our people think the chickens are nasty, because the same Chinese who are having their supermarket on this island, our people go and buy multiple form of chickens from them, whereas the Chinese themselves, they are paying people to catch the local chicken and eat it. So there's something, in that picture is not right with the way our people's minds are corresponding to things. So I think we need to still continue with a lot of education and work, because there's a lot of lacking of oneself, where and how we got here in the first place. I've been to last Saturday a gathering in relation to the reburial of our ancestors. Didn't even talk about that yet, but I will come later. And a gentleman said, there are so many different ancestral people. We have to think about that because they didn't understand each other. And I had to get up and make that clear. Our ancestors from the motherland always did understand or overstand each other, no matter what part of that continent you were. The problem came about is when the imperialistic colonial powers invaded and started underdeveloping the mother country, which is Africa, by deciding how borders should be constituted in that continent, and that created problems among the different tribes. But it isn't so that our people didn't know or understood each other. They had a great civilization. As a matter of fact, let me correct that word. It is not had. We still have a great civilization, because everything which the Western world right now need to survive on, whether it's oil, cacao, uranium, tin, tea. I'll take the famous tea nowadays, the rooibos tea. All of these things are coming from the continent Africa. And so the Western world has nothing like oil. They doesn't have anything when it comes to these things. Everything the Western world use or really depend on is something which is not their own. And it's always taken by force, with the most barbaric form of force, crimes, atrocity, which would be inflicted on other people just to capitalize and capture other people's wealth. I don't call it anything else but wealth, because there's a difference between salary and wealth. A lot of people think, well, I have a salary, I have wealth. No, wealth and salary are two big different things. Salary is something you work for out there, and you've been many ways exploited by working in which, so I want cooperation most of the time. They pay you, the tax goes with probably half of the money. That's not wealth. Wealth is when you are having ownership to your own economical infrastructure with all your assets come together. That is wealth. The oil which is coming out of the Ogoni region in Nigeria, that is wealth. That is why Shell organizations such as Shell are holding on to these treasures as best as possible, and would never relinquish them, but voluntarily by voluntarily say giving it back to the owner of these countries. So they will maintain that monopoly by force. And why is that? Because that is wealth. Land is wealth. And in Stasia right now, the community of this community hardly have any wealth, because they hardly have any land of their own. Some who had it, most of them are sold it away to the foreigners. You have recently the Golden Rock Resort, which everybody is rejoicing about on this island, which I think thousands of acres of landscape have been destroyed to put down a resort on this island. The bigger question is, what does that resort benefit you? What does that resort brings to you? What share do you have in that resort? What part of that resort are you having ownership to? None. As a matter of fact, I think and I believe this owner came from a family for hundreds of years in Africa in the flower industry, where our brothers and sisters were exploited. I'm hearing people on the island complain that when they work overtime, he refused to pay overtime. So I'm asking myself the question: when this community rejoice about the developing process like this, without taking a good look at what it brings for you, and what does it how does that define you and making you better when you talk about development? For whom is that development? So, these are some of the important issues we need to look at. Then, at the same time, in 2021 in April, the most barbaric crime again were inflicted upon our ancestors. They, within the field and the industry of archaeology, they had been excavated in an undignified, disrespectable manner and put on display as commodity as at the time our ancestors were enslaved. It was a sort of a deja vu. You go back to the crossroads, these people dig up our ancestors, steals our artifacts, steal our human remains, move them off the island. You have this organization, the Center for Archaeology and Research on St. Eustatius, which is SECA, is designed and have a board of people which, define and our ancestors as slaves. Mrs. What's her name? Gay Zutekau. She will call continually, disrespectfully, our ancestors slaves, And when I, for one, point out to her, that is disrespectful. You cannot call our ancestors slaves. They were never born as slaves. They were enslaved, made enslaved people by their ancestors' horrendous barbaric crime and criminalities. So you don't disrespect me and my ancestors by calling them slaves, because they were never slaves. But people like her maintain that kind of language use and fail to see the insensitivity of it. What does that mean to an African community? The excavation, for instance, took place without any consultation with the African community on this island. As a matter of fact, Ruth Stelter, who led the expedition, he refused and said he have no responsibility and he have no obligation to consult with the African community at that point in time. That's a totally disregard towards the African community. Because at the end of the day, if you take the Faro Treaty, which is something which define how a community define cultural heritage. A community define what they find is cultural heritage. It entails that the community has the rights to involvement, giving consent in relation to their heritage. Our ancestors' remains are part of our heritage, although our people doesn't really realize that. Now, let me put it this way. A whole great part of our community, not everyone. And that's a problem within itself. Because while the industry of archaeology hunts, exploit, plunder, and take what ours is, they are not taking it because it has no value. They're taking it because it has value. The point is, we do not see the value of what we have. We do not want to see the value of what we have. And so these people use this vulnerability and ignorance to their advantages. And as such, crimes continue because the excavation within itself is a crime against our ancestors, which are being inflicted upon our ancestors anew after they had been through the most horrendous and barbaric period through their life as people on this planet whereby they were enslaved or made enslaved people. So these are some of the things too within the educational system has to change. Within the educational system of right now today, if you find one sheet of A4 paper which is telling you about your history and who you are supposed to be as African people, it's a lot. Hardly anything is being mentioned in that curriculum about our history. And it's not going to change. We are the ones going to have to change that. Because it does not benefit the Western world to tell the truth about our history. Because their richness today in Europe, their cities have been built because of the trade. Their country has been built because of the trade. The amount of ships they had going through the Horn of Africa, specially built just to bring our ancestors from the motherland packed into ships like sardine, were landed here in most cases in Fort Amsterdam here on St. Eustatius to be reloaded again and to be redistributed throughout the rest of the Americas and the Caribbean. The chattel enslavement was one of the biggest form of crime against humanity, according to, as well, the UN and the European Parliament. So we as the African community need to wake up and take notes to a lot of these different areas which I just went briefly over. So I know it was a bit of a long introduction, but I couldn't help but, doing it that way. So my nephews, great nephews, and niece, please continue.
I would like to ask your opinion concerning the departure of the medical school, and now we are hearing again folks are getting all hype and excited that a new group is coming, and that could be definitely a boost once again to the islands. So many would benefit, whether be it rental, supermarkets, whatever line of income, even for the taxes, airport taxes, departure taxes. So what is your take on that?
Well, my take on that again is, and I don't like to use the word opinion, because the word opinion, I have a phrase on that. I wouldn't use that phrase here to the public because I don't think it would be rightfully respectable phrase. But let me put it this way. This whole euphoria about who's coming again, who came and left, and with the expectation it's going to bring great wealth. I think the first thing our people, again, and I go back to our community, has to have a change of mind, a change of mindset, in the sense of how do they position themselves and develop themselves to be self-sustainability. When you speak about self-sustainability with a notion of self-determination, it goes with responsibility taken and hard working in that sense to build your nation and yourself. The day you continue to remain content with the exploiters from outside going back and forth, who just comes to exploit the situation of this island, the ignorancy among our community, the weakness within government as we have them here, whichever government that may be. We remain cleaners, servant, and beggars. Let me be clear on that. And entertainers, They would go to Burning Spear concert. I see them in Europe, and they get drunk and high. I'm talking about white men and women, and they have no clue what Burning Spear is talking about or singing in that music about history, our history. So why I say that is to give a clear example is that until we start with a vision of, you know, putting down a foundation to be less dependent. I grew up and this place used to be producing their own food. Station used to export food to different countries, even to St. Kitts, Curacao, Aruba, you name it. Even to the water nowadays, which is imported. We have wells here which can produce multiple tons of water. Why we are not exporting water? Why are we the only ones sending all of our little wealth which we have abroad by buying everything which is imported? That implies that all your money which you have and you're working like slaves for some time, because some people have to have 2, 3 jobs just to survive on this island. That I call modern slavery, economical modern slavery. Why should you have to have 2, 3 jobs just to survive on this island? One should ask themselves that question very good. Why you would need to have 1, 2, 3 job just to maintain the things you would like to have in life? So my answer to that question is I cannot see really the benefit whether any medical campus come to this island, because question is how many local people are in the board, how many local people are in what you will call the executive body of that organization, how much ownership does the island have while that organization is being founded and organized and being put on this island? What kind of a financial ownership or benefit are you having into that sort of organization? I tend to say nothing at all. Um, these organizations and cooperation comes to these islands because they can have multiple times of years without paying taxes, and the labor, the few labor position which they create and give people, whether it's from cleaning to probably serving, here and there, is low leverage on salary at the same time. So I don't see these organizations enhancing our community on a long-term basis with a lesser sense of um, dependency. You remain very vulnerable. You remain very dependent to outsiders. And by the way, by at a point in time when these corporations decide their interest is not actually lucrative enough anymore by being here, they will just close down, pack up the business, and they're gone elsewhere. And you're left with the junk, you're left with all of the mess, and that's it. So for me, that's not really investment. That's not long-term vision of having any form of sustainability in the fashion of development, which is yours as a community. So I wouldn't be the one applauding these type of cooperation coming to the island unless there's a whole different form of an arrangement where the community can say we are having ownership to these corporations to some degree.
Yeah, so Uncle, I got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
As far as you mentioned a lot about us being African descendants. That's our heritage, as far as we know. Um, Not too much being shared on it in schools, movies as well. They don't really portray that much. Everything is whitewashed. So, um, looking at the state of the island and the rest Caribbean islands, or I would say the African diaspora, how much tradition or culture you still see present from how it used to be, as far as what you know it used to be then?
Well, it's a good question, and not only what I know it used to be, I think culture comes when you know your history. If you know your history, you're in a position to develop culture. And so, if I look back and I notice the teachings which I used to get from my mother and, for instance, my sister, which I think is your great grandmother, Jenny, those, grandmother, sorry. Look, they used to give us information about our ancestors. They may not have all the details, but they gave us a broad view as to the sense and notion where we come from. Now, when people speaks about culture, I tend to ask, define culture. What are you talking about when you talk about culture? I hear a lot about station culture, and then I'll say, well, what is station culture? Yes, station culture. And I say, but what is station culture specifically speaking? Yeah, culture from station, how we do things in station. But if I have to take that as a culture and how we do things and I combine it with the state of this community, with exploitation and white domination on this island, whereof I tend to say there's a gradual form of classical ethnic cleansing, whereof the the project developers are coming and they're buying everything up and they're pushing you aside, and you are just rejoicing and cannot wait to go into their facilities to have a beer. Is that culture? Well, it has nothing to do with me as African. Let me put it that way. In the first place, because our ancestor civilization was based on a civilization which brought everything to this world when it comes to medicine, when it comes to economics, when it comes to architecture, when it comes to engineering, when it comes to invention. I have a range of all of these different African heroes and sheroes and inventors, engineers, home, which I can display in an educational form to this island. So I would tend to say, unless you know where you are, who you are and where you originated from, because we tend to disregard ourselves as African in very much most of the cases on this island. No, I'm not. I don't have nothing to do with Africa. I'm a Caribbean. Who tells me? Since when you became a Caribbean? Huh? They extinct the Caribbeans. They extinct the Arawaks. And they brought our people in from Africa and enslaved them to build the forts, to build the ports down there, to build the slave passage which you're coming up from on the bay. All of these colonial sites on the island has been built by our ancestors because Europeans didn't have the knowledge of architecture to build anything. They're the most illiterate people on the planet when it comes to that. So if you ask me, culture, I have to go back to my history in the first place, and coming about knowing my history, which define me and you, then comes out of that a form of tradition, ceremonies, way of life, which we can call culture. Right now, all of that has been fractured, destroyed, taken away, and how our people directionless. So I will tend to say and answer that question, we need to go back to basics and start redefining ourselves, seeing and understanding and accepting the fact that we were not accidentally being placed here or came here to the Americas and the Caribbean. We were brought here by force, and everything which has to do with spirituality and the strength of that notion of spirituality keep us going today. We are here because our ancestors brought us here. we lived through them. We couldn't have been here because unless they were, it's like they have a saying, say, ancestors, give me a hand. It is through you I come into being. And we tend to forget all of that. So I think we need to go back to education about our own history in the first place. I always draw the pyramids as an example, and all of the prestigious cathedrals in the south of south of Spain, where the Moors, our ancestors, built. The pyramids today in the northern part of Africa, coming out of Kemet, Asian Africa, we tend to speak to only about the period of enslavement of our ancestors, with the impact of that continuing upon us today. But I think it's a thing we need to change too, because what does that constitute? When our young people hear that the only thing they can hear that we were actually enslaved people, it also brings a psychological way of wanting to disassociate yourself from that as well. There is an Africa, there is an African community, our African civilization, we people were existing prior to the period of enslavement. We hardly speak about that period. As I said on the beginning of this discussion, our civilization is the only and one biggest civilization on this planet, with everything what goes to do with engineering, medicine, scientists, carpenter, you name it. The Europeans were living into dark holes. They didn't know themselves from in front or behind, until they went and discovered other civilization and decide, actually, we have to take everything what they have by force, even their knowledge. Try and obtain their knowledge and re-emerge with their knowledge in a distorted form, as if we are the inventors of these things. Even the Pope, the thing he wears on his head, is a symbol coming out of Kemet, Africa. The stick and the form of the stick with the curves in it are coming out from Kemet, Africa, Asian Africa. Kings and queen, Europeans didn't know nothing about kings and queen prior to the within the Dark Ages. Is after they come out within the so-called period of enlightenment, they start talking about kings and queens. But then again, they copied everything when they talk about kings and queens from our civilization and distorted it. So again, to answer that question, we need to define ourselves. And when we define ourselves, I mean by recognizing and accepting ourselves as the people we are, a great people, a great and mighty people. We were always that. We are still that, although they tried to kill us all of us. We are still that. And we need to hold on to that, go back into our own history, base our education onto what our ancestors' civilization was and still is about, and enhance who we are. And then we will see the culture coming out of that. Because your history brings culture automatically, because it performs, a community performs based on knowing who you are, and act on based on knowing who you are, and everything you do is based on knowing and accepting who you are, and everything which started to play out in that community would then constitute what you call culture. So I hope I answered that question enough. I couldn't answer it differently.
Okay, Uncle. There was a time back I was seeing on social media, everyone was posting about the African saying, Ubuntu.
Yeah.
We're quick to use those terms, but we are still ashamed to be called an African.
Yeah.
How would you describe Ubuntu for us in our little station community?
Well, the meaning of Ubuntu is in short, I am because you are, to start with. And if one look at that expression in the first place, I think out of that you will realize you cannot be without the other. And that's a problem which we are faced with. But again, it's divide and rule concept of imperialism and capitalism and colonialism. We are put into a state of chaos, confusion. Sometimes they tend to say tribal warfare, but it's practically up against each other. And at the same time, while you are rebelling up against each other, the invaders are just taking everything away from you, and you're not even realizing it. And you are so thankful and grateful in reverse that the invaders can say, well, you know, I will give you a job to clean, I'll give you a job to serve, I'll give you a job even to come into my place. You feel great, you know. So all of this, I am because you are, mean to say, among our ancestors' spirituality and tradition and the concept of their philosophical doing in life is that nobody is above the other. You cannot exist. That's why we have a saying, say still. You cannot raise a village alone. I mean, that comes back from our ancestors. A village is being built and created with everyone together. That's just a strength of itself. So when it comes to Statia and our African community, because I speak specifically about our African community, I don't mix that up with no other ethnic groups, whether it is the white man and woman or the Indian or the Hindus. I am in solidarity with the Indians and their struggle, but you know, at the same time we have to get our own house in order. I cannot be worried about your house is on fire more than you when our house is in ash already and we have nowhere to go. And that's another thing. We as a people, we are more preoccupied with other people issues more than our own issues, and how we treat and, you know, deal and respect each other. How we build on each other? How do we cooperate with each other? How do we empower each other? How do we support each other? How do we give recognition to each other? How are we acting as a people together, proud to know that you are here building this supermarket as a black woman, African woman in this community, rather than when you build that supermarket, they're going to disregard you and run to the Chinese or whoever, who has no interest in this country anyhow. Again, our wealth keep going outside. You know, so Ubuntu is one of the expression among the Zulu people of our ancestors which consider the collective. We have a period too which we call Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa is a typical ancestral moment from the 24th of December running up until the 1st of January in the new year. What does that entail? It entails giving thanks and praise and recognition to the harvest over the whole year and everything which you accomplished during that whole year. So in that regard, Ubuntu is a very significant terminology in the broader context of expressing it and understanding it. And if you understand the meaning and the true meaning of what Ubuntu entail, then you as a people will actually be dealing with each other differently, because the mere fact that Ubuntu said, and the meaning of it in short, like I said, I am because you are, it's said you cannot be without me, I cannot be without you. And we tend as a community right now to see that not. We tend to disregard the rest over there while I am okay over here. I remember a time in Statia, you had an ancestral tradition. If somebody was building a house, everybody will get together and help them build that house until it comes to perfection. things like that does not exist anymore. So it's like one for all and all for one, and that's a concept of capitalism and colonialism of itself. So we are lost within in that whole chaos and vanity as it is today.
Okay then, next one, Uncle. So, as far as learning more about our heritage, you know, um, as people that got enslaved, carried out of Africa, brought here to the Americas, like you say, and the Caribbean, and wherever else we scattered. Um, what some of the main places or resources, influencers, movies, etc., that you would say would be good for our people to tap into, to learn, whether it's interviews, different podcasts, people that really have that knowledge about some of the missing pieces about our people. Give us some tips on that. Maybe some institutions, even foundations like your own, that the people could really tap in and get some more information on this, because for the lack of knowledge, we perishing out here.
Yeah, okay. Good question. For one, the St. Eustatius African Burial Ground Alliance, you put that into Google, you will come automatically to our website and our blog spot automatically. We have a lot of publication there, a lot of information there, educational information. At the same time, when you ask about sources, if you take, for instance, from nearby here, think within 81, I'm not sure anymore specifically, he was assassinated in the Republic of Guyana then, is Walter Rodney. How Europe Underdeveloped Africa is a very instrumental book to read. If you take the destruction of a black civilization by the artist Chancellor Williams, that's another instrument of education. One I would advise people to look into. If you take the work of Frantz Fanon, Black Skin, White Mass, for instance, The Fretch of the Earth, etc. Frantz Fanon was a great visionary in his time. He died, I think, was in 1952 as a consequence of leukemia in New York at a very young age. And as I said earlier, Walter Rodney, who's right here from the Caribbean. By the way, Frantz Fanon was also from the Caribbean. He came from Martinique. And Walter Rodney, he was born in the former, as the way they called it at the time, the former Republic of British Guyana. At the time it was called British Guyana. Today it's the Republic of Guyana. That's where Walter Rodney was born. The Chancellor Williams was an African in the U.S. who, as I said, wrote the book, The Destruction of a Black Civilization. These are educational instruments we can all use, and that will put you on, again, another step and another trail based on more insight and understanding of your history. You will then advance and start searching from there on, because all of these literature, when you get into them and read them, they also recommend other literatures. You have people who are instrumental, like Dr. Yuma Johnson, for one, who I am trying to bring to this island at some point in time. He's very critical about Africanism. You can learn a lot from him. He's very critical about the economical position of African people outside of the motherland. Very critical about the way, our wealth in the mother country has and continue to be monopolized by the Western world in that sense. So Dr. Yuma Johnson is one. Then you have Professor Dr. Smalls. You can Google his name on and all of his work. Go back. And by the way, Dr. Professor Smalls goes predominantly back into the barbaric period of European murdering and killing themselves as savages, you know. So to talk about bringing civilization to us who were civilized before they even know the notion or the meaning of being civilized, you know, it's very ironic, you know. So Dr. Smalls will take you there in the past, pre-colonial enslaved period of Africa, and into the today's world, as well as how, you know, Africa and we as African throughout the world has been and continue to be impacted as a consequence of colonialism, racism, institutional racism and discrimination within the labor market, within the penal system, within the educational system, you name it. You know, those are factors which comes out of the legacy and continue to persist based on the legacy of European enslavement, colonialism, and trafficking in African people. And then you can look at people like Muhammad Ali recently, who actually made history by not going to fight a white man war to kill other people who never call him who never call him a nigger for that matter, you know. And he made it clear he's not even free in his own country, which is called the US, but yet he had to go in somebody else's country and kill them on the basis of fighting for freedom. So, you know, we can stay close to home at times. There's a lot of things which are there right in our faces. But again, we tend to forget history very quick. And as if there's nothing out there. So there's a lot of information out there. And the names, like I mentioned, I do believe will take you to a next level. I will start with, if you want to read books, you can go, like I said, The Destruction of a Black Civilization. The author name is the Chancellor Williams. Google it. It's there. It just pop up in your face. How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Walter Rodney, right from here, back door here by us. The Republic of Guyana, for instance. Frantz Fanon from Martinique at the time. Black Skin, White Mass. The Fretch of the Earth. You know, he was born in Martinique, right back here. And Professor Smalls. And another good friend and scientist, African scientist of mine as well, is Dr. Kemani Nehutsi. You can Google his name, Kemani. You know, that is Kemine, Nehutsi, Nehusi, Dr. Professor Kemani Nehutsi. He has a world of literature out there about Kemet and Asian Africa, whereof his study is based on Africology. And I don't use the word Afro, neither do he. We speak about Africology is referring to the continent of African people and Africa. Afro is a hairstyle among so many hairstyles, and I don't understand why we continue. Even African people in the U.S. has became more advanced with progressive insight over time. They used to call themselves Afro-American. That has been changed. They are now Africans American. We are the only people tend to use terminology which carries us way back and distancing ourselves more and more from our origin. We are Africans, period. And we are Africans throughout the world. The Chinese, the Indian, the Hindustan, the Afan. You ever hear them calling themselves other than who they are? We are the only people who tend not to do that. So to answer your question, my humble nephew, those are some of the advice and artists and so. And yeah, talking about, yeah, pictures, that's very dangerous because it depends on whose pictures you're looking at. I tend to, if you want to see pictures which will give you a sort of an insight to things sometime, Spike Lee, as a writer and producer, he did some remarkable work when it comes to pictures. John Singleton did some remarkable work when it comes to pictures as well. During the time, I remember The Heat of the Night with Sidney Poitier. That that scene where he slapped the white man back became controversial at the time because it was not supposed to be in the reality that the white man was supposed to slap him, but he shouldn't have done what he did. That was a controversial moment. So again, when it comes to picture, if you take The Heat of the Night, for instance, it shows you the embedded racism in that film, whereof an African investigator, could not be an investigator, criminal investigator, having the knowledge to investigate crimes according to the white people around him. So it says a lot. So those type of films I would advise people can take a look at. Not the junk nowadays, which is mixed, where you have films where of the narrative has been changed, and Tarzan, like the picture, Tarzan is the only white image in the whole of Africa, could tell you about the jungle, and the people existing in Africa know nothing about the jungle. So these are type of film I wouldn't suggest to advise our people to look at, because these are the typical distorted historical facts which they bombard your mind with all the time. And I would tend to say, try to search more and more, instead of looking for a white historian message, for African-centered historian, because there's a whole shift in that regard. The lady who died past there, I forgot her name, Angela something is her name. She wrote a lot of good books away. I can't come up with her name right now, but there's a lot of historical information out there. You need to learn to search and come up with the right information. And Maya Angelou is her name. Her books are very interesting as well. Maya Angelou, that's the name I was looking for. So to answer your question, to search for information, gathering more insight into your history, and in a way will enable you to rewrite and change the narrative and reclaim our dignity and respect and sovereignty. Those type of information will give you broader insight. And I must say, to end here, I think what is another challenge, it's another challenge per definition. The reburial of our ancestors right now, which is about the earth, which is, I said on the beginning of this interview, is a criminal act. They need to be reburied in a time with a dignified burial, with African traditions, African ceremonial tradition, not like what happened on the 1st of October last year when the white European Dutch went to Curacao to so-called inaugurate Tula, where they had the descendants of the enslavers going to inaugurate Tula. You saw that a whole storm came, where a whirlwind, as a matter of fact, took the chairs and tables up and tossed them on the side. That's this spiritual strength of our ancestors saying this is disrespectable and it's unacceptable. So with the reburial of our ancestors on this island, which we are still fighting to bring them back to a dignified and respectable reburial, is an ongoing struggle up until today. So I will ask our community to get more and more involved in that struggle. and demand that the government come up with a suitable location where our ancestors could be reburied with dignity and respect, whereof we can reclaim for them their sovereignty and our sovereignty at the same time. Thank you for that question.
Uncle, you know I always have to bring in a touch of my experience being a civil servant. I am no longer one after 23 years, almost 23 years, serving my community with passion, dignity, honor, and respect. And I know at some point in time when it was coming down to the final decision that I said, enough injustice tolerated, enough disrespect, enough conquer and divide. After 23 years, it just went down like nothing. I irritate myself when I see at every graduation from the secondary school that they are telling them, go out, study, and come back and give your contribution. Well, I did. But how was I treated? How are you treated coming back to give your contribution? I don't encourage any and I don't discourage any, because that is something you have to deal with mentally. Coming home on a vacation is different than living in the system. And I fought hard for my family to be able to provide for my family, and I gave that same energy to any client that I had under my care for the years serving as a civil servant. And when you look at it, I boil down to say, it's best we have a rechtswinkel, so a law firm on the island like in the Netherlands, instead of having an ombudsman come on a nice tax-paid vacation. And I am yet to hear how many cases have been legally solved. You hear it in my voice because it's a shame and an injustice the way you are treated. The amount of policies being made, and the one policy that I relied on to deal with the official complaint that I submitted, it was just brushed off, I guess because it was against a European.
Well, I'm hearing the agony you went through and probably still going through, and it is only normal, but there is gross injustice. And I'll come back before I go into it a little deeper. That's why when I tend to speak about government on this island, I always speak about the Dutch government, because at the end of the day, you speak about a public entity who does not really have no power at all in their hands to make big decisions. If you take even the educational system, it falls under the Ministry of Culture, Science, and Sport. If you take the Justice Department, it falls under the Dutch Ministry of Justice, and so I can continue. So I said earlier in my explanation to certain things that we are living on, look, there's colonialism, enslavement of our ancestors, and the impact of that legacy, which still continue to impact our people today. Because one tend to speak about slavery past. They had the memorial here recently from last year, the 1st of July, up to this July 1st was passed, which basically only created chaos. You had in 2000, I think, of 22, in December, Margrethe, which for me was no big deal, other than The state did what it had to have done long time ago, which was long overdue. Acknowledge the state involvement in the trafficking and enslaving our ancestors as within the industry of slavery. And the state made that possible. The state was instrumentally in that. Not even to speak about the Catholic Church, which one does not speak about, were instrumentally in the slave trade at the same time. They are the richest form of entities today when you look on this planet throughout Europe, throughout the Netherlands. So we are living in a colonial system whereof the legacy of colonialism and what comes out of slavery are still persistent today in the colonial structures. So when it comes to your situation as you speak, and I don't think you're unique in that, I think there are more of our people who are in the same situation but are not prepared to make sacrifices. They are not prepared to come out of their zone of anxiety and take a stand. I'm not going to judge anybody personally because everybody knows their burden best. But until we get over the notion of fear together, to work together and to take a stand together, because your plight which you're speaking about, it should not have been your plight only, because I don't, like I said, you are not unique in that. Others are going through the same thing. And others should have take a stand and realize when they take a stand collectively, what they're going to do. They're going to fire all of you. They're going to jail all of you. It does not exist. But that fear is so much in the mindset of our people, it's almost embedded into their functioning as a human being. And we need to get over that. So when it comes to these kind of practices, they're in essence criminal practices because it does not happen into the Netherlands. And our ombudsman, and even though let me correct that, it does happen in the Netherlands, but you have institutions where you can go and get your representation as best as possible. Now, our ombudsman is, for me, really is not even what the ombudsman report will be about, whether it's in your favor or not. It's not juridically binding in the first place. They can throw it in the garbage bin, so to speak. And when you speak about a Rex Wrinkle, that could be a start, which is a legislation department where you have lawyers who can assist. Again, it depends what type of lawyers are in there too, because if there are lawyers who are really just Eurocentric orientated and seeing you as minority or seeing you as less, they does not really represent your interests as well. That goes for the judges as well, because you may go to the judges here. I'm sure none of them is African judges. They are all European judges. And, you know, they represent a system which they look down upon us as second class and third class citizens. And there is no justice when it comes to that, to this community. And I think when you speak about a local government, whichever local government it is, I don't care which one of them it may be, it doesn't really comes down to nothing effectively, because at the end of the day, without the community collective taking a stand against the so-called installed structure, colonial structure, which you call a local government, which is within a public entity, which you say in Dutch, rechten en plichten are totally different to that of a municipality, because we are not even a municipality. We have actually a big problem still at hand, because at the end of the day, it is the Dutch central government. And by the way, it's on paper. It's in the regulation. Since the transition in October 2010, it is stated that the Dutch central government is responsible for these so-called three public entities, which means to say, basically everything when it comes from a higher level, the Dutch are the one going to make the decision at the end of the day. But I do think it's, again, abuse of human rights and human justice, where justice is lacking, that when people are put in those positions that you see, you send out your black student, African student, to study and invite them back home, which, by the way, they have a problem even going to Europe, because we were fighting a long time, because by the time when they reached Europe, they didn't even have a social security number, which means they were stateless to start with. I think that's sort of a resolve right now. That is an indication as to how they look at our students even going to Europe to study. And so when you come back here and you are taking a stand, if you get into that position, because right now what is taking place in these islands is that white Europeans are fulfilling and being put systematically in the key positions, whereof you as an African person on this island with the knowledge how to do in return, train these people and steer them to do the job. Yeah, and that's why I spoke earlier about institutional racism and discrimination. Those are the basis of these practices. You are not going to get that function. You're going to be disregarded. They're going to manipulate you. They're going to tell you you're either over educated or you're undereducated whatsoever. But at the end of the day, they are non-educated white men and women are coming and flooding these islands in the key position, who has no sort of geographical and historical notion of we and our community as a people. And for them is high salary and a place where they can sit in the sun and do hardly anything and relax in the tropics. And that's all this is about, because they have no affinity whatsoever with you as a community. And these are things what should change. Even to the school teachers, we shouldn't be having white teachers in front of predominantly 95% of an African community, teaching them with an image which does not correspond with my image. That image forming is very mixed up for our students and our people. So as you said, I don't expect too much to change in that direction unless our people realize that they have to get up, take to the streets, don't go to work, and demand justice. Unless that happens, you will be alone. I went through it myself. I was the first only African person sent here by the Ministry of Health to build up the mental facilities on this island. I got so much of a disregard and disrespect from our own people. It was incredible. Now that I established a facility on Statia and Sabre and took my early retirement in 2017, up until today, people are turning to me because the facilities which I left, they are functioning, they are not the same anymore. And I've been saying that to them. For me, it was not only a job. It was part of coming home and contributing to my community and my people. For the white man and woman, it's just another 8-hour job, and they couldn't care less. And that's something I believe our people need to get in tune with themselves. They are not going to do it for us. There is not in their interest to do it for us. We have to do it collectively as a community. So I think it's a very important analysis which you gave, your own experience, and it's something which I'm sure others is going through, but fail because of anxiety, fear, to take a stand and come together, empower and collaborate with each other and take a stand and demand what is theirs. Demand justice, their rights to exist and to be equal. You don't have to like me, but I'm more man or woman than you probably, coming from Europe. So you cannot come here and disregard my existence and put me away as third and fourth class citizens and continue treating me like that. Until our people come to the realization that change is within their hands collectively, nothing is going to change. Thank you for that question and illustration as well. Thank you, Carol, and my nephews and everybody. I would also like to thank the general public at large. The general public, and specifically again, and I know a lot of our people sometimes does not like to hear me talk to this in this fashion, but it should be in this fashion. It should be about you and me, us, as a community, an African community. Whether or not you like the terminology African or not, that's something you'll have to come to terms with. But I would like to take this moment to thank the community at large and those beyond our community of St. Eustatius, African people, to listening and continue listening to what we are sharing with them, the legacy of colonialism, imperialism, which continue to impact us all globally, whether we are in New York or whether we are in St. Kitts. We are still going through the same practices which our ancestors went through during the Middle Passage. And so it's about time, and I think our ancestors is calling upon us more than ever for us to come together as African people here in Statia and globally to take a stand and to demand justice, demand reparation, not on the conditions of the white man and woman who are going to dictate what reparation should be for us. It's our moral duty to stipulate what we and how we determine and define reparation should be about. And reparation is not only about money, indeed money, which there could be no sum which is enough to quantify in relation to the crimes which have been inflicted and continue to be inflicted. Because when you continue to hide the truth and not tell the full truth to a community as to how they are in this predicament today and how they got into this predicament, it is also a crime which persists today still. Withholding the truth, not clarifying the truth to the community. Apology is well and done. Apology does not solve the problem. Because a lot of people think and talk about healing. Healing cannot come unless there's justice. Justice in reconstruction, justice in re-education, justice in economical ownership and asset to your country and having that into your hand, and not secluding the mother country which is being exploited today more than ever, the continent of Africa. So, reparation is a broad understanding. But more importantly is how we African people here in Statia, St. Kitts, Sabre, St. Martin come together collectively, rewriting our history and reclaiming our sovereignty and rewriting our own narrative. Nobody gonna do that for us. It is our moral responsibility after the struggle our ancestors went through to provide us a space of existence today. The torment, the tortures, the crimes which have been inflicted on them, they fought against injustice just to have us here today. We need to continue their work and we need to come together. And come together, we're going to always have our little differences. Nothing wrong with it. It's healthy to have differences. Supposedly you don't have differences, you will be mute like a robot. So we need to have differences, but we need to have a broader vision going forward collectively as a people where we stand together, because together we stand, divided we continue to be separated and fall. So I thank you beyond Statia as a community to listen and to pay interest in what we were talking about here tonight. Thank you and have a blessed night, everyone.